My daughter had a garage sale of all my stuff for $1.00, but she put a for free sign on me, so I let her know, the house isn't free. Anyone buying the sofa gets this old lady for free, no charge, my daughter shouted, scanning the small crowd assembled in our driveway. Take the couch, and I'll throw in Mom as a bonus. Wrap her up like leftovers. She's past her expiration date anyway. She turned to laugh with her friends, voice booming. It is the ultimate guilt special, comes with a side of whining and dementia. Then she raised her hand, pointing directly at me. Come on, folks, give me $1 and take her trash too. Just don't leave the old bat behind. They laughed, some in confusion, some with cruel enjoyment, enough to sting. I stood steady amid what used to be my entire life. A framed wedding photo leaned against the porch post. A younger version of me in a white gown, beside my late husband in a crisp tuxedo. My granddaughter's first sweater, hand-knit in pale blue, folded atop a mismatched mug from Zurich. My chemistry textbooks, published papers, lecture notes, all tucked into a box labeled $1.00 or less. They had even tossed my mother's ivory comb into a battered plastic bin marked free. They treated it as though it and I had been separated from value at birth. I did not speak. My voice had quietly retired years ago, replaced by tasks no longer needed. I watched someone shuffle through a stack of photo albums, grimace at the dust on a floral scarf, and drop it back as though contaminated. No one asked, "Are you all right?" As though I mattered. Maybe I was the item on sale. Maybe I had never been anything but old and inconvenient. The crowd swelled. A few neighbors peered in over the fence. Children tugged at their parents to buy toys. A man in shorts picked up a painting, my painting, and smelled it, then dropped it, saying it looked like something a second grader made. My daughter noticed. She scoffed loud enough, "It's Grandma's art, free with the couch or an extra $1. Who even paints still in this century?" She flashed a grin. The people around her laughed. I glanced at the painting, a watercolor of wildflowers I had painted decades ago for her wedding, and bit back tears. I thought of the nights I stayed up, correcting her essays and performing experiments in my home lab, the same one now used for storing empty boxes. I thought of the countless times she had called me late at night because of equipment failure at the university. None of that remained valuable here, not to her, not to the world. Then came the borrowed microphone. She hauled it in, turned on a tiny speaker, and strutted onto a makeshift stage of 2 wooden pallets. I watched as she swung the mic around. The crowd grew quiet, sensing spectacle. "Everybody ready for the big finale?" she shouted. The crowd tittered. I stepped back, but the light caught my reflection in a window blade. I looked smaller than I felt. "Here's the deal," she said into the mic. "Buy something, anything, and you get Mom for free. Oh, and if you pay $5.00, I'll even throw in dinner, cooking, and chore duty for a week." Her laughter ricocheted across the driveway. "This sale is auntie-approved. Guilt-free shopping, guilt-full living," one old friend of mine gasped. She stepped forward, her eyes shifting between my daughter and me. She mouthed silently, "Are you okay?" I squeezed my lips together and gave her a nod that felt like breaking a promise. More laughter followed. I watched as a man handed my daughter a crisp bill and grabbed a rusted bird feeder. My daughter slapped the bill in the cash box without filing away the item's origin. $1. My worth then became $1. People moved on to the next display. Apothecary bottles I had used to teach titration in labs, an old ceramic vase I had won at a department party, framed academic certificates. Everything cheap, labeled, and labeled free in some cases. Even my wedding ring box appeared, cradling nothing inside but dust. Someone whispered, "She must have taken the ring already." Another whispered back, "Maybe Mom took that already for safekeeping." I stared at the empty box. The ring was hidden, but what really mattered, my heart, my memory, my identity, they were exposed now, cheapened in broad daylight. By then, I had walked slowly across the lawn to the opposite corner, behind the crowd. I lifted my shirt pocket and felt the small recorder I carried. I had asked my neighbor to plug in a battery earlier. It was quietly recording every insult, every item exchange, every snicker. I pressed record again with my thumb, hoping the device would survive the afternoon sun. Suddenly, the lens of a camera from a neighbor's phone found me. I straightened my shoulders. Even if I stood alone, I stood intact. I stepped onto the stage. The microphone powered on, making a popping sound. My daughter saw and her face froze. The crowd whispered, uneasy. I cleared my throat and spoke. You can buy my belongings for $1. You can treat memories as trash. You can toss me away like last season's sale item. But if you think I am worthless, you have forgotten what I built. A hush fell. She glared at me. I continued. I was once a professor of chemistry at the University of Michigan. I held a patent on a life-saving medicine. I taught classes to students who now practice medicine. I spent years in lab, making formulas to fight illness, while here I stand, reduced to a price tag. Emotion trembled in my throat, but I pressed on. When someone tossed that comb into a bin marked free, they put a price on my lineage. My grandmother's comb, my mother's name, it meant nothing. But here is a truth most refuse to see. Value is not determined by price. It is determined by memory. My daughter sputtered. The microphone echoed her breathing. I added, if you think removing me changes the equation, you misunderstand the formula. I dropped the mic. Silence. The crowd drifted, uncertain. Some nodded at me, some looked to her, ashamed. I turned, bones creaking, and walked back to the lawn's edge, carried by nothing but dignity. They called it business. I called it burial of dignity in broad daylight. And I walked home with my head taller than when I came out, because I had remembered my worth before they priced it. They told me to remember my place. After the sale, my belongings gone, my dignity stretched thin. I sat alone at home, with a stack of old paper, the letters, the photo, the patent certificate. That's when memory arrived. No one is born garbage, I murmured to myself, because I was taught differently. Once, I was a professor of chemistry at the University of Michigan. I held a patent on a novel therapeutic compound, a formula that helped patients with chronic disease. My students called me Dr. Harper. Some of them cited my papers in their own research. I lectured under fluorescent lights, demonstrated titration, supervised lab experiments with calm hands that moved steadily from test tubes to lives. Then came the night everything changed. I was 16, just a girl really, pregnant and alone. My husband had walked away saying he wanted freedom, not a dead weight dragging his name through campus rumors. I stood on the porch, hand on my belly, feeling every inch of fear. I did not collapse. I did not scream. I turned around and pulled on my winter coat, because I had to survive, and I had to raise a child. From that night on, I studied by day and worked by night. I swept hospital floors. I delivered newspapers on cold streets. I sold lemonade from a little stand by the sidewalk, not because it made much, but because it bought diapers. I mowed lawns for neighbors who gave me pennies. I collected discarded bottles for deposits. For every dollar I earned, I smiled and tucked it into a flimsy aria of hope. Each night, I pressed my daughter, swaddled and sleeping, to my chest, and wondered which sacrifice was greater, the loss of sleep or the loss of someone to wake up for. When she was old enough to walk to preschool, I studied chemical bonds on my lunch breaks. When she was sick with a fever, I sat by her side and tried not to break beneath the weight of 2 lives. When she cried because she missed her dad, I told her, I will work 3 shifts a day if that keeps you safe. After graduating, I won a scholarship to graduate school. Somewhere between lab and lullaby, I earned my doctorate. I discovered a molecular pathway others said was too risky to explore, but I proved them wrong. I taught undergraduates, mentored students, and still tucked into my birth certificate a small note for her daughter's future. When I returned to Michigan, I became a professor. I wore crisp suits and polished shoes. I commanded respect in lecture halls. I did not mention diapers or debt or bottles, or the nights I cried silently on the floor because I doubted if I was enough. But she knew. She always knew. She learned to resent the equations I solved, the experiments I published, the thesis I defended at 2 a.m. She came to believe that science was something I loved more than she had ever known how. One afternoon when she was 16, she threw a stack of my journals on the floor and shouted, "Formulas don't feed me. They don't tuck me in at night. They don't tell me I am enough." She slammed the door and left. I stayed at my desk, tears falling onto ink and graph paper. I listened to the silence settle like dust. She whispered years later in a voicemail, "Mom, you always chose science, but science never chose me." And I believed her. I apologized too many times, and still she called me once, after she learned my patent was worth millions, and said, "So you cared more about numbers than me and Dad?" Yes, I had cared. Care was calculation. I had measured every cost, every risk. I had won formulas that saved lives but lost the person I lived for. Sometimes I sit with the framed diploma from Michigan on the wall and wonder, was it worth it? Because long after students praised my name, I sat alone, so she felt forgotten. All the years spent in lecture rooms, in labs, the nights bent over beakers, they built my reputation, but hollowed out my home. I look at the antenna phone ringing next to my bed. I think about forgiveness and what it means now. Because she left me at the garage sale, wrapped me in a sign that said free. What I earned for academia meant nothing in her eyes. But I remember the nights I cradled her, promised her science would buy her a world beyond substitute mothers. She did not get that world. She got chemistry instead. And hate that fact. That rejection shaped her, and when she calls now, voice trembling, "I was wrong," I lie quietly, I say nothing. Because certain truths cannot be patched with apology. Certain wounds do not heal when you realize too late the cost. So despite everything, I carry on. I stand silently, knowing I did not raise garbage. Even when they sold me like I was trash, I remember that every formula I developed carried someone's chance at life. And every shift I worked, every test tube I cleaned, was so she might grow, unafraid, into a woman of her own choosing. No one is born trash. Sometimes they are made to believe it, but sooner or later children grow into mirrors. They reflect everything we gave, love and sacrifice. And if they see only science, not soul, they have forgotten the heart behind it. I look out now at what we once called home. I breathe deep, because next time they say I'm worthless, I will remember I was a professor once. I taught the world, and somewhere I still taught my daughter, just not what she wanted to learn. They say silence is weakness, but I learned the hard way. Only silence gives you space to choose how to strike back. That day at the garage sale, when my daughter's laughter echoed over that driveway sale and my memories sold for $1, I moved without making a sound. While she barked out deals and tossed me into the free pile, I had already prepared. I had hidden a tiny camera in the sleeve of my cardigan. It was discreet and battery-powered. As she marched through piles of my life, yelling insults like ammunition, the lens watched. Every human body has a price tag in some families. Today mine was marked 0, but behind the lens I was recording proof of betrayal. I filmed the sneers, the body language, the customer's discomfort, the moment she slapped the sign, "Free Grandma," on my folding chair. After she stormed off with a box of my belongings, I retrieved the camera from the jacket. My hands shook only a little as I placed the memory card inside my wallet next to my bank statement. Because I had also taken a different kind of recording earlier that morning, I printed the transaction log from our joint account. I had left some funds there for bills and groceries. What I found was this: withdrawals labeled household account. She'd been taking small amounts over many months. Hundreds, maybe thousands from that account without my knowledge. She had told neighbors she was helping with mortgage payments. I looked at each line. $200, 0 cents here. $150, 0 cents there, always spent for family. I saved the screenshot on a flash drive. Timestamp, amount, balance remaining. And then I pulled out the last piece of my silent rebellion. The will. I had signed my final will in early 2019. Before cancer weakened me, before the debt chief collector called, and before she decided it was okay to sell me for free. The document had never been shared. Only my attorney and I had witnessed the signatures. I tucked it in a sealed envelope that said, "Not to be opened until 2028 or death, whichever comes first." At that time, I passed a full mental competency exam required for notarization. The physician signed off, and the notary made clear annotations in the margins. No one could challenge my clarity, not then. Now, in the privacy of my study, I pulled it out. The edges were crisp, the ink clear. It named beneficiaries. It designated my beloved lab notebooks, savings, and the house to my adopted son, the one my daughter refused to accept because he had been my student long ago. I stared at the paper. It felt like closing a circle, a gentle but unbreakable circle. That night I burned what remained of her hate, figuratively. I drafted an email to my attorney with 3 attachments: the garage sale footage, the bank transaction log, and a scanned copy of the will. No message, no anger, only, please initiate elder abuse investigation. Please execute will upon confirmation. I pressed send before dawn. 3 days later, my lawyer acknowledged the receipt. He confirmed that the footage, bank logs, and notarized will had all been verified. He informed me that the legal notification process to all relevant parties had begun. When I slept, it was with peace. Not pride, not revenge, peace. In the days that followed, gossip drifted among neighbors. Some asked why my daughter had suddenly declined to attend our old friend's luncheon. Others wondered why the garage sale items had stayed out for 3 days untouched. A few thought I had gone inside alone to cry. I didn't cry. I was simply rewriting the story. One afternoon, my daughter sent me a text. "We need to talk. I'm sorry about the sale. Can we meet?" I read it with clinical calm. Yes, we could meet, but not about forgiveness. I replied simply, "I suppose we can." When she arrived, she carried herself tight with regret. She bit her lip when she saw me sitting in the living room. I made tea. She sat down, avoiding eye contact. She said, "Mom, I didn't mean what I said. I got carried away. I thought—" I held up a finger. "I know." I reached into my dress pocket and retrieved the flash drive. I placed it on the table. She paled. I laid the bank statements in front of her next. She shook. "Mom, Then I slid the letter of apology she would never send. The will. She looked at it as though seeing the house vanish under her eyes. "That was made? Years ago?" She trembled. "For your sake," I said softly. "I did not tell you it existed. You were welcome to be part of it, but you preferred to price me at nothing instead." She dissolved into tears. She sobbed, stumbling over apologies. She begged me to reconsider, to amend the will, but I didn't flinch. The built-up loss of trust was bigger than any legal document. That night she removed herself from my sight. I stayed in my study and looked at the images, the comb in the free bin, the Chase lounge tagged $1.00, the customers' shame-filled faces at my announcement on the makeshift stage. I played the video one more time. There was no shouting, only truth. In my silence, I had recorded pieces of dignity still intact. I realized then someone might burn my lab notebooks, but they could not erase the patent, the formula, the impact on students. Someone might burn my marriage photo, but histories live beyond printed film. I archived the video, the bank logs, the will, all in 2 secure drives and a Dropbox project I shared only with my lawyer, and a Dropbox project I shared only with my lawyer, and a Dropbox project I shared only with my lawyer, and a Dropbox project I shared only with my lawyer, and a Dropbox project I shared only with my lawyer, and a Dropbox project I shared only with my lawyer, and a Dropbox project I shared only with my lawyer, and a Dropbox project I shared only with my lawyer, and a Dropbox project I shared only with my lawyer, and a Dropbox project. In the end, I did not retaliate with noise. I retaliated with documentation. I made sure that day could not be erased by shame or time. The next morning, my daughter's phone was off. I made coffee and watched the sunlight dappling the front yard. I poured creek water into the old ceramic mug I kept on the porch shelf. I sipped slowly. No photos of me were there, only the sign. All goods, final sale, everything must go. I closed my eyes. Not everything had gone. I remained, a silent witness, a scientist, a mother. I had not sold myself cheap. I had recorded the proof, and that was enough. It had been exactly 1 week since my garage sale humiliation, a week since my daughter displayed me like an item marked free, a week since I began my quiet rebellion. That morning, the knock at the door was different. My lawyer stood at the threshold, clutching a heavy manila envelope and wearing a neutral expression. I put down my teacup and led him inside. He nodded courteously. I felt steady, composed. No anger, no fear, just accuracy. He placed the envelope on the living room table. The house, which my daughter insisted she inherited, suddenly felt smaller. There was tension in the quiet. I did not flinch. "Madam Harper," he began, "I have read your final will and testament, signed in early 2019. It names the sole beneficiary of your estate." He paused. "The total estimated value, approximately $1,200,000, 0 cents. My daughter rose, face pale. The lawyer continued. "All real property, the home at 401 Willow Lane, the savings account, the certificate of deposit, everything is left to your adopted son, Thomas Green, the young man you have cared for since his accident more than a decade ago." My daughter's lips trembled. Her husband strode forward, fists clenched. "This is preposterous," she spat. "She must be confused. She would never do this willingly, giving everything to a kid who isn't even, he is just some tenant, no relation." My lawyer remained poised. "You are mistaken," he said. "Mr. Green is legally your mother's adopted son. The will was notarized on March 3, 2019. At no point were other heirs consulted. Under Michigan law, this document is valid." My daughter shouted, "It doesn't matter what the law says. She made this after she had dementia. Where are the updates? We trusted her." The lawyer opened another folder. "Here is the recording," he said, "from the garage sale event. The bank logs." He placed them on the table. "Because of elder abuse concerns and unauthorized withdrawal allegations, we will also proceed with a petition to recover misused funds." I remained seated in my chair, appearing calm. Inside, something tightened, a cord of relief interlaced with sorrow. It was the moment truth became tangible. My daughter wept. My son-in-law screamed, "He is not your son. He is a charity case. You are enabling a usurper." I rose slowly. The lawyer gave me a discreet nod and backed away. I looked at my daughter then and said softly, "You auctioned me off as worthless." He asked nothing. He stayed. He fed me. He cleaned my dishes. He never once made me feel like I was a burden. My daughter slumped to her knees. Tears pooled, face buried in her hands. The years of shame and drive for success crashed into her chest, turning into sorrow. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I thought I was doing what was right." I closed my eyes. Her words did not cleanse her actions. My son-in-law sputtered, "You have no right. Do not believe this nonsense. We will challenge it in court." The lawyer interjected, "The will is binding. We can pursue civil restitution for improper fund usage, but it cannot be undone unless proven fraudulent. There is no such proof." My daughter looked at me, tears in her eyes. "Mom, if I could turn back time—" I shook my head. I had turned back time in my mind many times. No apology conjured the storm out of chaos. "My house was built with my hands," I replied. "My career was built by my work. But what stays, what will forever stay, is the love someone gave without demanding ownership." My daughter rose shakily. She stepped back, defeated. Her husband rustled his papers and stormed toward the door. The furniture she had once treated as family crumbled in their memory. Thomas remained quietly at my side, looking between us with tears in his eyes, loyal and steady. Then the lawyer laid out the logistics. The title deeds, bank account access, charitable trust file, all changed hands. Thomas would manage the family home as a nonprofit center for women in science mentorship. They would host outreach seminars, lab internships, and community talks under the name the Harper Foundation. My daughter's voice cracked. "You are destroying everything we built together." I looked at the empty shell of the house, filled not with love, but with expectations she never met. "What we built never included love," I said. "It included profit, resentment, entitlement. I am building something new with him." Thomas leaned forward. He offered me a small box. Inside was a key engraved with the foundation's seal. "For you," he said simply. I took the key. I looked at my daughter one last time. She stood, shaky, sobbing, unsure where to go from here. I whispered, "I shed everything disposable that day on the driveway. Now I choose only what lasts. Thank you for teaching me I deserve better." My lawyer stood. Thomas offered me his arm. I walked toward the door. As I passed her, she raised a trembling hand. I did not turn. There was nothing left to say. The sun had left casual streaks across our yard. The house I built was no longer the house she owned in her mind. It belonged to memory, to truth, and to a love that did not leave when convenient. Thomas opened the front door for me. I stepped inside, and for the first time in years I felt like I was home. He came by mid-morning, his steps quiet on the hardwood floor. My daughter had retreated to her room after the reading of the will, tears blotching her cheeks. It was just me and Thomas in the living room, 2 generations bound by heartache, neither of blood. Thomas, my adopted son, sat across from me, holding a small file. There was no fear in his posture, only tenderness, as he spoke with the calm of someone who truly belonged. "I think you should hear something," he said. He pressed play on his phone. The image on the screen was grainy, dated, the backyard with my young daughter on her first day of school. I was carrying her on my back, sweat damp on my palms, her little shoes dangling behind me. I remember that day. How the sun was too bright. How I had forgotten breakfast, but I wanted her to have her dress ironed and her shoes polished. He paused the video. I took a breath. Then he pulled out a folded slip of paper, a scanned copy of an old receipt. He slid it across. It was dated April 2002, Michigan State University Graduate Program, tuition payment. Notes: cut dinner to 2 meals a day to afford this for her. His voice steadied, gentle. Mom chose to raise her. She didn't choose academia over a child. That was never the question, but she chose to feed you instead of herself, so you would eat metaphorically and literally. My daughter rose from her seat. Her eyes were swollen, her voice trembling. I am so sorry. I thought she loved science more than me. I was angry when she canceled parent-teacher night because she had a conference. I was angry she graded papers at midnight. I thought I was last. Thomas inhaled deeply. He met her eyes with something fierce yet forgiving. She doesn't think that anymore. I know, because she paused her research to nurse you through pneumonia. I know, because she turned down tenure to raise you. My daughter collapsed into tears, covering her face. She murmured again, "Why didn't she tell me?" Thomas reached across and took her hand. "Harsh truths sometimes heal." "She did, just not where you were listening." I watched them. The air in the room shifted. Pain did not disappear, but it sagged, softened. They sat in silence, my daughter's sobbing stilled, replaced by something like regret. "She never asked me to go to the lab," she whispered. "But me, I refused to go to her heart." Thomas nodded. "She wasn't raising a science prodigy. She was raising you. Somewhere along the way you misplaced the point." There was a long pause. Then she stood, wiped her eyes, and said softly, "I want to make amends. I want to understand who I lost." He offered no answers, only a shoulder she could lean on. I realized then that my purpose had never been the formula or the lecture, it was the witness. My existence forged 2 children, one with a scientific dream, one with learned gratitude. One chose resentment, one chose devotion. Thomas stood and hugged her gently. I stood too. They hugged as though through that embrace all the forgiveness I ever needed passed through. I spoke then. "I never wanted you to study chemistry, sweetheart. I wanted you to study life. And when you marked everything as research, maybe that's what I failed to teach." My daughter nodded, tears falling once more. She found my hand. He let go. I felt the warmth of truth in his grip. She saw it then, the difference between love that weighs dollars and love that weighs devotion. They stayed long. We shared stories that afternoon, of protests we attended, of lunches she had gone hungry through her teens when I had little to give, of scholarships she won, and conferences she missed because she was taking care of me. Thomas watched my daughter listen, really listen, for the first time in decades. She didn't ask for inheritance. She didn't demand forgiveness. She only wanted to understand her mother, completely. When she rose to leave, I closed the door behind her. She held her breath at the hallway, uncertain how to step forward. I said nothing. She nodded, as if collecting herself. Thomas turned to me. He offered a quiet smile. "She'll heal," he said. I nodded. I had witnessed betrayal, humiliation, injustice. But I had also seen the seed of redemption. I pressed his hand and pointed to the study door. "Let her in," I said. That Saturday felt different. Festive lights hung between trees. Neighbors brought potluck dishes. Children ran with balloons, and the summer festival echoed down the block, the scent of grilled corn and churros mixed with the noise of laughter. I watched it all from the folding chair beneath the big tent. I had attended these fairs for years, handing out napkins I crocheted, teaching baking lessons. But this time, something pulled me toward the microphone stand, borrowed from the PTA. When my name was announced, the gossiping hush swallowed the music. I rose. My bones ached, but my voice did not waver. I pressed play. A grainy image, my daughter on the driveway, slapping the sign "Free Grandma" on my empty chair, laughing with everyone else. The crowd murmured. I watched the video again, people buying my things, tossing my comb, tossing my dignity. When it ended, I spoke clearly into the mic. "This is how you treat a mother you think is worthless." Then I reached into my pocket and retrieved a small notebook, my daughter's childhood diary. I opened it and read in a soft, trembling voice. "I hate my mother because she never hugs me. She chose formulas, not me." I paused, gathering silence like a shield. Then I continued. "I chose to exist so my daughter could live, but she chose resentment and killed our shared memory in the process." The neighborhood stilled. The children stopped wrestling. Women dropped spoons mid-bite. Men blinked at me as though they had lost GPS of empathy. I looked out at the people I had known, faces I'd smiled at across fences, waved at church. I thought, they have seen me as part of the picnic set, decorative but forgettable. I raised my voice. If a child may blame her mother publicly, then I also may share the truth. Because love is not entitlement, and motherhood is not guaranteed respect. Some faces reddened, others shifted uncomfortably. I watched my daughter's cheeks tighten, her eyes well. I paused the reading and faced her directly. "You accused me of preferring lab coats over lullabies, but I sacrificed every midnight paper, every lecture, every penny I earned, not for prestige, but so that you might never wonder what your mother was doing at 10 p.m. Was she loving you or saving the world?" I believed I could do both, but somehow the message got lost. The hugs never came. She turned her head, unable to hold my gaze. Her husband grabbed her arm, not to stop her, but to steady himself. Then I said, "My handwriting is clear. I hate my mother for not hugging me." "That was written when you were 11. 11. Not when you graduated from college or when I published my final paper. When you thought I could only hold test tubes, not your heart." I stepped forward slowly, as if the ground beneath me might crumble. But when someone treats you as worthless in a crowd, friends laughing, neighbors watching, you either stand or disappear. I chose not to drown in apologies I had already done. I've accepted rejection, but I refuse to be erased. A hush. Then the festival music came back, subdued. People exchanged uncomfortable glances. A few children huddled and whispered. Then I spoke softly, so everyone felt the weight of each word. Some mothers leave everything for their children: inheritance, education, memory. But if the child chooses resentment, the best legacy may be forgiveness for oneself, not expectation from the past. I folded the diary, walked off the stage, and walked past the rows of my belongings. I collected nothing, not even compassion or pity. I walked out of that tent, holding my dignity intact. At the perimeter of the gathering, Thomas found me. He offered a gentle hand. I accepted it, not because I needed support, but because it was time to stand supported. Behind us, the gossip rippled. Some admired. Some whispered shame for my daughter. Others just turned away. I did not ask for applause. I did not seek sorrow. I sought only truth. And sometimes, truth felt heavier than suffering. That evening, she came to my front porch. The sun was setting, throwing long shadows across the lawn where once she'd played. I was seated there, silent, knitting a scarf I never planned to finish. She approached slowly. Her eyes were red. Her voice trembled. "Mom, I was wrong. I hurt you. I saw a sign on a chair and made it real. I saw your life as free goods, not a life worth knowing. I'm so sorry." She knelt in the grass. She bowed her head, tears falling against the concrete. "Please, forgive me," she said. Her words cracked in the silence. "I don't expect the inheritance. I only want to make peace." Stillness pressed between us. I watched her shame, but I felt none of the old fear. Something had unraveled. I spoke calmly, no trembling voice, just the weight of years. "I forgave you when you were 8, the night you drew a picture of us dancing. You said, Midilam de koi vena de konkai konghong. I told you then, I work so you won't have to carry my absence. She gasped, her head shot up, eyes wide. That memory avenue to childlike sorrow shook her. But forgiveness then was enough, I continued, voice steady. You were still a child. You confused absence with neglect. Now you are not. I closed the knitting bag at my side. She looked up, uncertain, hopeful. But now? Now you want forgiveness for what you did yesterday. You shook me beneath a sign. You priced me for entertainment, and when I rose, you sold me again in silence. An apology does not rebuild what you broke. She reached for my hand, hesitated, let it fall away. The dusk cooled the grass beneath her knees. I stood slowly, the scarf left unfinished, in my lap. I am not angry, I said. I am just done. Thomas came forward then, guiding her up from the ground. He held her shoulder with quiet strength. She looked up at me, tearing at her sleeve. Mom, please. I turned away, lifted a slow step, and walked into the house. I did not ask her to come. I did not say, stay. Inside, I found Thomas waiting. He offered his arm. I took it. We moved through the hall, the front door closing softly behind us. Outside, on the lawn, she stood, still in the threshold of regret, not understanding that a threshold is sometimes a one-way line. I reached my study. Thomas followed. No words came between us. He simply held the door open. I stepped past and turned to close it behind us. The click echoed finality. He leaned closer and whispered, "You don't carry her pain anymore." I nodded. It was true. I carried only memories and formulas, patents, lectures, a legacy larger than blood assuaged. He guided me to my favorite chair by the window. I sank in. He draped a shawl over my shoulders. Outside, dusk deepened. The night shifted. The world changed because I closed that door. It was not a betrayal. It was clarity. A mother does not have to accept a child's resentment forever. A mother may love unconditionally, but does not owe redemption on demand. They say blood is thicker than water, but respect is thicker than blood. And I had made room for respect in Thomas's devotion, but none existed in her guilt. I sat there in the hush. I did not cry. I did not ache. I just felt peace settle in a way years of pain never allowed. That night, I let sleep come. Without fear, without apology, without expectation. I had broken the cycle. I had taken back the parts of myself sold, dismissed, cheapened, and I walked forward with dignity. The sign above the porch door now reads, The Harper Foundation, Empowering Women in Science and Life. The house isn't mine anymore, but it belongs to something bigger, and I belong to something that chooses to remember. The ribbon came down this morning, amid laughter and cheers. The local librarian read the proclamation, the mayor gave a short speech, and former students who I had mentored as a professor stood in a line, clapping politely. Thomas stood beside me. The foundation's board members spoke of internships, scholarships, and workshops, officially launching here. I was next. My knees trembled, but when I took the mic, the shift inside me, pain into purpose, was complete. I once believed my greatest legacy was science, I began, voice steady. The crowd quieted. Children from the neighborhood sat cross-legged in the grass. Neighbors leaned forward. Volunteers held programs, the sun warm on their faces. I thought chemical formulas and patents defined me, but now I know truth is my real legacy. Not what you publish, but what you live for. I paused, letting that sink in. A few lifted their heads, curious. I sacrificed nights of solitude and student lectures so that one child could grow safely. I moved beakers and lab reports not for prestige, but to pay for her lunch, to keep a roof above her head, to keep hope alive. That was the unspoken part of my science. That was the human part. I glanced at Thomas, his eyes soft with pride. Today, this building will offer tutoring in STEM for young women, financial aid applications, and workshops about chemical careers. It will be a sanctuary for single mothers seeking education, not because I chose science over family, but because I chose to prove family includes science. Applause rippled. They clapped for the change, for the expressed intention that came from the pain. I felt the pulse of redemption in their hands. I lifted my gaze to the house. the ingredients of my life now a tool for giving others a future I had once sacrificed. I forgave a daughter once, but forgiveness is not a blank check for forgetting. My grander inheritance is not a house moved by guilt. It is the truth reclaimed from shame. A hush followed, then a gentle wave of applause returned. I closed my eyes briefly and breathed deeply, then said softly, "Thank you." I stepped off the stage. Thomas came forward, bowed to the guests, and led me inside. They filled the rooms with laughter, tours, and well-wishing hugs. Inside, I saw an office corner neatly transformed, shelves with donated textbooks, framed photographs of female scientists. I paused by a window and looked at my reflection in the glass. I saw someone older, yes, but not company property, someone chosen to keep living, not discounted. Thomas joined me. He offered a small box. Opening it revealed a house key pendant engraved with the foundation seal. He slipped it gently over my head. "It is yours," he said. I pressed his hand. "House wasn't free," I said softly. "But your love, that's priceless." He smiled quietly, tears in his eyes. Across the room, volunteers were setting up refreshments in the kitchen. Neighbors were chatting about new programs. One attendee approached me and said, "You have inspired us all, Ms. Harper." I nodded, thinking about my daughter, thinking of sorrow that tried to break me, but failed. My daughter does not live here anymore. She no longer owns this house, even though she inherited only resentment instead of roots. That chapter is closed. She asked for forgiveness too late, and I had already chosen peace over apology. As the festival lights flickered on in the yard, I stood at the doorway and watched community members filter out with promises to volunteer. I was no longer a cautionary tale, I was the storyteller. I touched my pendant. I felt grounding in identity, not in blood, but in truth. A little girl ran past and shouted, "Thank you, Grandma." She didn't know I wasn't her grandma by blood. She knew I was safe. That was enough. I heard laughter from the children's corner, where they practiced simple lab experiments under volunteer instructors. They taught. Vinegar in a bottle, baking soda lift off. Science for the curious, for the forgotten. I listened to parents talk about how they never had a woman role model in science. Until now, I watched a student put a sticker on a poster. Dr. Harper Dad plus Mom equals science, and realized this story had come full circle. I stepped inside. The door was open, welcoming, and I accepted that I did not own love because of birth, but because love was chosen right here. By Thomas. By these women. By every girl who believed she could hold a Bunsen burner and not be burned by prejudice. This house will now echo with purpose, not pity. I turned and walked into the hallway where once were my gowns, my dissertations, my memory boxes. They remain, only now they belong to service. The night sky edged gold beyond the living room. I rested in my chair and felt something settle, not worthiness, not pride, but belonging. I had not chosen to be a mother, but I had chosen who called me mother, and that's where legacy lives. Legacy is not in silence anymore. It lives in actions, in community, in truth passed on. And tonight, I am more than myself. I am the founding voice of a place where others can rise. That is the story I will leave behind. If you have ever been sold as worthless, or been made to feel invisible because of age, or because someone forgot your sacrifices, this is a space for truth and healing. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where silence ends and history begins, because when a grandmother speaks, the world finally listens.